I'm going to post a video that I did last Friday. I think it's about some of the conversations about my grandfather. So, anyways, enjoy. Bye. I'm trying to look at my hair here. It's in a little frizzy bun. But sometimes I have to, like redo it. I've got really thin hair. Like my hair is really thin. And I think it's because of, well, I've always had thin hair ever since I was younger in my 20s. But it got most definitely thin after I moved in this area where I'm at now. Like I was in a higher elevation because I used to live in Durango, Colorado. In Durango. And the elevation there is like 70 or 7,000, is that right? 7,000 compared to here is around 5,000, something like that. So when I moved here first time, I was on a whim, me and my kids. And I usually call myself a gypsy because I move around a lot with my kids when my kids were younger. And we went to the reservation. Oh well, whatever. And so anyways, went to Durango, probably about 2012. Stayed there because I had to go to school and finish out my college. And then after that, moved here to this area in the Mesa County. And so when we moved here, my hair just started, my scalp started to get really like dry and crusty and just really itchy and stuff. And then I in those times, when we moved here, it started to really get itchy, and I developed some fungi on my scalp, which was like really annoying. I thought it was very annoying. And I was so excuse me. I was so frustrated because I couldn't get rid of it. I went and saw a doctor. They gave me medicated prescription for like shampoos and things like that. And then I tried all sorts of essential oils and stuff to try to get rid of it, like tea tree oils and stuff. And then what else did I try? I tried all sorts of stuff and it wasn't working. When I would Google, things that would kind of help, would try to help. I was just trying to find solutions to try to get rid of the fungus that was in my head. And I started to develop like really dry and flaky, and they were like thick scabs. They were just like thick scabs on the top of my skull. I mean, my scalp. And sometimes it would get like really thick, and like it would just kind of flick off, and then some of my hair would go along with the oh, what do you call that, the dryness of the, now I'm losing my focus here. I just said it too. See, my mind is just going just weird because I can't remember. Like my short-term memory is like really, I'm documenting my short-term memory loss is like, I guess a plus. So I don't know if it's because I have all sorts of stuff on my mind that I forget things. But so anyways, back to the scalp thing, because I'm like jumping around now. Multitasking and trying to crochet at the same time is like really a failure for me, because I get into, I start a conversation and then all of a sudden I'm just like into this crocheting of mine. So so I have these like, these dry spots, and they would just flick off, and my hair would be with it. Sometimes it would be a whole bunch of like a big, you know, wad of hair with the dryness of the scalp. And it was scab. That's what I was. I don't know why I was. It was a scab that it would develop into a scab, like a thick scab, and then I would kind of peel it off, and then most of my hair roots would go along with it. So I got some kind of, open patches in the back, and sometimes it would get so annoying and dry that it would start bleeding and stuff. It was terrible. I just didn't like it. And I tried everything. I got into the point where I just got emotional about it and really, excuse me, I got really embarrassed because my scalp was just really itchy. I was just constantly like, oh, this is just really driving me nuts. So then one day, I had started seeing a chiropractor. He's a holistic chiropractor, and so my daughter was seeing him. And one time I went over there, and it was for her appointment. And I had told him, I said, I am having some issues right now. And then he listened to me, and he took a moment and listened to every, complaint that I had about the situation with my scalp. So I told him, I said, I think it's fungus. I tried medicated, shampoos and conditioners, and nothing helps. And, Head and Shoulders soothes it and makes it feel better. And then he finally looked at it and said, okay, well, why don't you try this? Because you're not getting any kind of white blood cells going up to your scalp to initially heal your fungus issue, because there's no antibiotics or anything like that. It's going to help. It's just going to make it worse. Initially, it's just feeding it. So I was like, that's interesting. And so he said that build up your immune system, eat proteins and stuff like that. A lot of good things for your blood, because you want to build up more white blood cells. And then he said, on top of that, you want to do an activity that's going to raise your heart rate so that your blood can circulate all through your body, because your blood is not reaching this area of your head to initially get rid and fight that infection that's on your head. So, and then he said that I suggest you, what activity do you like to do that's an exercise? And I like running. And then he said, well, do a mile a day, or however many miles you do, or how much time you run. Do that every day for 1 week. And I was like, okay, I can do that. So so I did that. So and I remembered that there was some days that I just didn't want to. And then I was dedicated that whole week because I really wanted this to go away, this pain on my scalp. So by the end of the week, after running at least a mile a day, it was on a Friday or Saturday that I realized that, oh my gosh, the scabs are gone, and it's like, and my head was really smooth, and there was no itching, and there was just little tiny parts of, the fungus, but it wasn't that bad. So then I continued to run just to make sure, and then I ate a little bit better, healthier that week, so that way I could, make sure that I had my white blood cells build up. So then by Monday, my daughter had another appointment, and so I told the chiropractor, I said, it like disappeared, it's gone. And he's like, that was the problem, is because you need to stay active whenever you have an infection, and if it doesn't reach at a certain part of your body, you're going to have to, that's the kind of the secret to trying to heal a part of your body if it's in infection wise, like, fungus. Like our white blood cells are the ones who are the fighters. They fight our illness, they fight our sickness, they fight infection. So I wasn't getting that, white blood cells to, travel up to my head. So it was basically just down under, like on the lower part of my body. So when I was exercising and running, my blood flow was just going all over, from my toes all the way to my head, and then it healed it all up. So I was really happy. So when I think about those things in the past, I kind of incorporate it into what I need to do for my healing process of my body. And sometimes I think about my grandfather. My grandfather was a medicine man, and he used to do a lot of things that would kind of heal his processes, like fasting. I didn't realize that fasting was a good thing for your gut. So then my grandfather would fast as much as he could, and it would heal his body. And what I found out recently is that fasting so many days kind of regenerates your cells to become new again. And so I was all thinking to myself, why didn't I realize that, So whenever I have a gut issue, like, I'll have like issues with gas or painful, belly aches whenever I eat and stuff. And so then I think about, oh, maybe I should just fast for a couple of days or 3 days. 3 days is my max. I usually like fast for 3 days, and then I call it good. And then I'm like, oh, I feel so much better. And then, I can eat slow, get back into my regimen of eating better foods and stuff. So I've kind of taken that into account with, I kind of learned from my grandfather on his whole, a whole way of living healthy, and then he always used to drink. I always thought he was weird because so on the reservation we have hogans, and it would get really hot where my family lives. It's in Monument Valley, Utah, and it's just a desert, just nothing. I don't know if you've ever been to Monument Valley, but in the summers it is so tremendously hot because the rocks there get so hot and absorbs all the heat from the sun. And so when it gets up to 110, 112 degrees on the res, and most of my family members, some of them don't even have air conditioning on the reservation. So they have like shade houses. They call them shade houses. And it's really cool because they'll have this area where it's called a home site lease. It's an acre of land. And I think they only get like an acre or two on the res that they can apply for. And Monument Valley is just like so beautiful. Like if you, the dirt is so rich and so, it smells so good, especially after it rains. In the summer when it rains, it smells so good. And to me, the dirt smells yummy. Like I want to eat it, I think it's because of all the minerals that's in it, in the dirt, which at the same time is kind of gross because there's a lot of, like, we call them glawnies. They're alcoholics, and so they go and they pee all over the place, and there's a lot of animals that are out there and stuff. And of course there's the stories about the the yannies and stuff, which is the shapeshifters and things like that. There's a lot of taboo about that on the res. So anyways, I try not to say it too much. Anyways, they have shade houses. That's where it's shade houses on the res, and how that's built to keep cool during the summer is that they would build. I get like, it's kind of like I don't know if you've ever, modern days they have those things outside during the summers, like this open patio, but it's really in the middle of, their lawn or backyard, and there's open space on top of the roof. It's not closed. Well, it's kind of like that, where it looks like a frame, and then they get like tumbleweeds or something. Not tumbleweeds, but more like different kinds of vegetation, like branches and stuff. Branches from, because we had juniper cedar trees on the res, and so they would take some of those branches off of those juniper trees, and then they'd put it on top of the shade frame, the frame of the shade house, and like put it on top of the roof, and so it would look like, like a bunch of branches on top, and then it would be a cooling kind of place area. And so they'd have that outside of their hogan, because when I was growing up, I used to go on the res, and my grandmas and all her sisters and stuff, I called them my grandmas. They all would gather in there, and then they'd cook, and we'd just cool off in that shade house. A hogan was the same way, but the hogan is so small and our family is so huge that we don't all fit in the hogan to cool off because it's a mud house. And so, anyways, my grandfather, he did a lot of ceremonies and stuff like that in the hogan, and so we learned a lot from him. My dad learned a lot from him when he was growing up, and he told me bits and pieces about what my grandfather was doing and stuff when I was growing up. And so I kind of took everything that my dad said about what my grandfather did, and a medicine man, how to take care of himself, and all these other things that he would do to try to help him with his gut issues. So one of the things that I remember is that, when we were in the hogan during the summer, we'd have like mutton stew and fry bread, and it was always these hot items of foods that we would eat. And then my grandfather would be, and at that time I was like, the Coke girl, the ones, the cold Cokes and things like that. You drink Coca-Colas and all that. I was into just, drinking Cokes, cold Cokes, and we didn't have refrigerators on the res, so and we lived off the res when we were kids, so my family used to call us the city girls. Oh, the city girls are crying. They want to go back home where, they have their electricity and stuff and running water, because we wouldn't shower or anything like that. We would have to, how they did it was bathe in a big metal tub, and that the horses would feed out of, where the cows would drink water out of. So they would bathe in that, and you'd have to find a private spot, or you would have to bathe in front of all your family members, So we didn't want to do that. So we would want to go home at the end of the day or the next day as fast as we could, because we wanted to get home and be where the air conditioner was and the refrigerator was, so that we can have everything so cold during the summer. But I didn't like going there because it was so hot. So my grandfather would always drink these hot teas or hot coffees after he ate mutton stew, or if he ate fry bread. And I always thought it was weird. I was like, why is Grandpa like drinking all this hot stuff after eating fry bread and mutton stew? Well, then I found out when we were growing up that the reason why he did that was because the animal fat would get, hard. When it dries up or gets cooled off, the fat gets really hard. It's like a hard, solid kind of fat. So when they make fry bread, it's made out of lard, so that would get really hard. So when you drink something hot after a fatty meal like that, the warmth of the liquid in your body will melt the fats to go through your blood vessels, and then it won't clog. You know, it won't clog. So if you drink something cold after you eat something fatty, then it's going to, you know, get hard in your blood vessels. So my grandfather always drank. I don't know how he knew this, because the only education that he had, you know, the only education that my grandfather had was knowing that he is the herbalist. He knows all the plants on the res on what's healing and good for your body. He knows all the prayers. He's educated in all the prayers and the chants that he sings. There's different kinds of songs that are healing to your body and everything else. And then, you know, the ways of how we're supposed to live, you know, the beauty way, the hajo way, the, you know, and all these other ways that are ceremonial aspects of how you're supposed to live, and how it's supposed to be good for your mind and your whole body as one. So my grandfather was very educated in that, and he knew a lot about the history and the symbols, and, you know, all the everything. So all that secret and all that knowledge, everything that he knows has been passed down to, I think my auntie has all of that. But there's hardly anybody who's a medicine man, not like my grandfather, because he was the last one. He passed away in 2013. And not 2003. My mom passed away in 2013, which is really crazy because my grandfather passed away in 2003. So anyways, and he passed away in the same month as Johnny Cash. I remember that. Passed away in the same month as Johnny Cash, which I thought that was really interesting. And he didn't die of a heart attack. He didn't pass away. He didn't die of anything that was like, you know, traumatic. The only thing that what got him and what got Val Kilmer was the pneumonia. Pneumonia was the one that got him. Prior to having his pneumonia, he was in a vehicle accident, and at that time he was like 104 years old, or some say he's 104. Nobody knows his exact age because there's no record or any kind of concrete evidence of when he was exactly born and what year he was born, because of the time when they did the census and made everybody, you know, the government rounded up all the natives and made them sign, you know, census, you know, rolls and stuff like that for us. And so he didn't know his birthday, and he didn't know what day he was born. We just kind of guessed, you know, and we're just, you know, kind of guessing that he was in his hundreds. And because he would tell stories about long time ago, like in the early 1900s, and when he was a little boy, and it was like, so my family would just go along with that, you know, those kind of stories. But he, prior to having his pneumonia, he had a really bad accident because he used to drive all over the place. He was always on the go. He always drove everywhere. Even at 100, he was still driving. I mean, my family would say, stay around, don't go driving around. And he'd just take off, you know, like driving everywhere, wherever he wanted to go, he drove, you know. And I remember that, you know, I heard that he had an accident, a car accident. And in that accident, it was so bad that he was thrown from the truck. I don't know how many feet away from the vehicle he was thrown out of, but he broke a hip. Now, he only broke a hip, and in the process, he was healing from his hip injury, and which I thought that was really, you know, pretty cool that my grandfather was healing pretty quick from his hip injury, and he didn't even have to have a hip replacement or nothing. And then at that no time at all, he was up and about. And after that, he started developing a cough and, you know, some issues with his lungs, and then he was put in the hospital, and then he just passed away after that. He was in the Shiprock Hospital, I believe. I remember. I may be wrong. My grandmother was here in this hospital that in our area in Mesa County. She was in this hospital when she passed away, and that was like 2 or 3 years prior to my grandfather's death. No, wait. When did she die? Or when did she pass away? I think it was 1998 or 97 is when she passed away. My grandfather was very brokenhearted because prior to my grandmother's death was my shije'e, which is my uncle. He was the baby, and when he passed away, my grandmother had no... It almost seems like she had no reason to live. My grandmother was such a softie. She loved all her kids. She just had a big, huge heart for kids. If any of them were to be taken away from her, that was the end of her life. I mean, she was just such a loving, loving mother to all her kids. And when she lost her baby, that's when, her life changed. It was not as meaningful as it used to be. I remember my aunties would tell me that when the draft came around, my dad was drafted, and my other older Shija'e, the oldest one, he was drafted to Vietnam, and then my other uncles were, so three of the boys in the family were drafted to Vietnam, and my grandmother couldn't handle it. She was just so brokenhearted that the government had taken her boys away from them out of the country to do something that was just totally against what we, who we are. Unless, I know we had to fight for our lives, for the value of who we are when we were, way back in the day in the 1700s when we fought the Spaniards and other tribes just to keep ourselves safe. But to take us away from, like, the government was just ripped her kids right out of her uterus, kind of thing. So she became an alcoholic really bad, and she was so brokenhearted. And then they came back. They had to have ceremonies done because of all the things that happened in Vietnam. And my grandmother, eventually, she quit drinking, and she went back to being a grandmother. And I mean, my grandmother didn't really quit drinking until I was like, I think I was really young. I think it was about six years old, maybe 5. And I remember one time I saw her drunk, and my grandfather was there in the Hogan, and my grandmother, she had her hair down. It's very vague. That was the last time I seen her kind of different, because after that, the next time I saw her, she had her hair all nice and pulled back, nice and made up, and she had her jewelry on and her velveteen dress and everything. She was always dressed really nice. She was always dressed to the 9, man. She was just a sweetheart. And then I noticed that she was more loving towards us, and she was always sweet. She was the sweetest lady. So when that happened, when my grandmother had passed away, my Shija'e, the baby, passed away, and he was brokenhearted. I didn't realize how brokenhearted he was. It was almost like he didn't have a purpose to live, really. So those kind of stories I find out after the fact, because I wasn't really close to my grandfather. I think he would have been proud of me if he was alive today, to know that I kind of embraced what he believed in traditionally, because I was raised with my dad, and my mom in a Christian home. And so knowing traditional stuff, it was forbidden in our home. So and I don't blame my kid. I don't have any kind of ill thing against my dad or my mom um, for that, and I don't have anything against Jesus for not allowing us to know who we are and learning from the culture and the traditions that you know, that my grandfather had. I should have respected him more. I should have been more understanding, but now I'm that way towards my family members, especially when it comes to my auntie who has a lot of traditional and cultural knowledge and really keeps that close to her heart. And so when she goes out, sometimes she always tells me, when you go out into the land and you pick from the earth, you always thank the earth for taking it, and you appreciate it, and you say prayers. So when I go out in the country here in the Mesa County and I pick either sage, sometimes I'll go out into the hikes and stuff and I'll pick the sage and I'll pop it in my mouth and I'll be like, thank you for your medicine, for healing my body. Thank you for this abundance of medicine that is on the land. So then I would, I wouldn't thank Mother Earth. I would thank Jesus, because that's kind of like what I do. And I thank Jesus for the earth that He's created. So it's like, I thank Creator. He's my creator. And so there's teas out there that I would pick, and the juniper trees I pick for the ash. I burn it and I make ash for lukewarm mush and stuff like that. So I usually just pick those simple items off the land out here, and then I thank the Creator for all the things that that He created on this earth, and that it's making it really good for my body. So anyways, those are the kind of things that I remember about growing up and stuff, and some of the things I regret now that I'm older. But I see a lot of my grandfather and a lot of my family members, especially my auntie and some of my uncles that are still alive, and I really respect their traditions and stuff. And some of them can be a little bit far-fetched, kind of like, okay, you need to calm down. It's kind of like Christianity. Calm down now. Just don't get too uptight about certain things. There's some things, but keep loosen up a little bit. So, but anyways, and nowadays my tribal members don't keep the beauty way, the Hojo way, and all of that, because they're always constantly worried, and they're always warring against each other. I see it on social media all the time, so I get really frustrated. It's like, you guys need to calm down and just like support one another, because you're just fighting each other and you're making each other sick. That's the reason why you got diabetes. That's why you're eating, terrible food. You're not making really good choices in your diet, because you're not valuing the teachings of our people, the teachings of what we're supposed to learn. My grandfather I don't think he's ever had an anxious moment or a depressive moment. I mean, he did have a depressive moment when my grandmother passed away, and my brother his son passed away. My Yeji passed away. And so, I mean, he had some depressive moments, but I think in time he got to where someday I'm going to see them again. That was one of his positive things, is that someday I'm going to see them again, and at the moment I'm going to just live the way I'm supposed to live. And that's how my dad is. I mean, I think when my mom passed away, that was the saddest day of his life, is when my mother passed away. But he is so dedicated to what my mom wanted for my dad to do, was to continue taking care of us kids, continue to take care of the grandkids, and making sure that we're, doing what she did when she was here. So he's doing that right now. And I think that's kind of like what my grandfather, his attitude is like, I have to take care of everything here, but I'm going to see my wife and I'm going to see my son again. And, he's going to see all his family members again. And so everything was just always positive to him. And he didn't have any worries, really. And so that's kind of like what the beauty way is and the Hojo way. I was listening to this medicine man one time, and he was talking about, you're supposed to live in that right path, and if positive, always positive on that right path. And you were supposed to be dedicated. And it was almost like dedicated to Jesus and his ways. So I was I would identify it to that, what he was talking about. It's like, oh, the Hojo way and the beauty way is like a dedication to good life, being positive. If you're living that way, then you have good health, a good mind, and everything else will be good for you. And you will live a prosperous life. And so what this medicine man was saying, that's the reason why we have all these illnesses, is because we've gotten off that path and we're not on that positive path. And a lot of times we always get off that negative path, and that causes a lot of health issues. So anyways, and that's what I was, that's kind of like what I was my stories gets to at the end is, something good for yourself, good for your mind and your body, so you can live at least a healthy, prosperous life. So I kind of take everything that I've learned, even though I wasn't raised traditionally or culturally. I'm learning again, and I want to embrace it, because I didn't have the opportunity to do that because I was such a negative little brat about everything. And so I didn't really respect anybody or anything, or not even my grandparents. Well, my grandmother I loved more because she just loved me a lot. My grandfather was just like, we're just like this far apart from each other, It was just like, this is me and this is him. Oh, yat and then that was it. Shanala, and then, I didn't say that. I should have say Navajo, now I say it all the time. Yat Shanala, yat Shijaja, or, Shiyaj, and Shimasana, and stuff like that. Yeah, I never used to say anything like that when I was a little girl because it sounded so funny coming out of my mouth, and it was embarrassing. And all my relatives would laugh at me and tease me and stuff. So it was embarrassing for me to say anything like that. And so now I do. Sometimes I say it wrong and then they laugh at me, but I'm just like, okay, how do you say it so I can say it right so you don't laugh at me? So, but it's fun. It's fun to learn Navajo and all the little ways and stuff. So I'm really thankful that I got an opportunity to actually live on the res at an older age, and then go to school on the reservation in college, and then learn all my cultural stories and traditions. And I just, I regret that I didn't show that to my grandfather, who is the medicine man and who was always proud of his other grandchildren who really embraced the traditional cultural ways. And so I kind of, I regret that. And he would have been really proud of me to see me graduate at the Dene College, because we did a lot of ceremonial, things, and understanding cultural ways on how to enter a home, and especially the Hogan. So that's my tidbit. That's my story for today. And I hope you get something out of it, because, it's important to get things out of people and know what their background and their stories are and stuff. And maybe you can take what I say and apply it to your life, and maybe it'll make you feel a little bit better, and knowing that positivity helps with your health. It helps with your outlook in life and stuff, and not worrying too much, because my grandfather was always the one who was very positive about everything, especially when it comes to taboos and stuff, Oh, it's going to be fine. We're just going to fix it with, ceremony, and that's it. And then it'll be okay. Everything will be back to balance again. Everything is a balance for him. So he tries not to get anything out of balance. It was always a balance in life. So anyways, I'm gonna let you go with Sunday. So have a good day. And if you have any comments or any kind of, you want to interact with me, I will try to follow up in those comments. If you have anything to say to me, I will respond either thank you, or if you have a question, I'll try to answer it to the best of my abilities. Okay, we'll talk to you later. Bye bye.